Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I'm going to be doing another video for you. This time is going to be my TBR for the month of October. So in October, my thing that I've been doing since last year on the channel that I'm gonna probably try to do every October is going to be a horror themed month for the channel. And for my reading in general. I don't know if I'm going to do themed months like that more often. I'm thinking I might do a few months a year, do themed ones, if I'm able to, like maybe during February, focus a little bit more on like some romance adjacent books, maybe some Christmassy stuff around December, something like that. You know, I don't know for sure, but at the very least, a lot of my horror reading goes into October. And so that is what I'm going to be mainly focusing on this October. I have 6 books picked out that I'm going to be reading, and it's actually all of the horror books that I own plus an extra one, because I thought about spreading them out a little bit more and only doing a few of these in October, but I couldn't pick just a few that I wanted to do. Plus, in order to have sufficient videos for the channel that were horror related, I had to include all of these, which I don't mind at all. I think it'll be fine, but I'm hoping I can get some more horror books so that I can do a little bit more horror videos kind of here and there on the channel, because I don't do very many. But at the moment, these are the ones that I have, so I figured I would read them this month. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is one that I have been looking forward to for quite some time, and that is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This is going to be my very first Stephen King book. And I've been wanting to read Stephen King for a while for several reasons. First of all, he's a very popular author. He's probably the most popular horror author out there, and considering I want to get a little more into horror, maybe not super hardcore into it, but I like to at least get into a few authors. You know, I already love H.P. Lovecraft. You know, I want to get into a few other authors, and he seems like a good, you know, a lot of people love his work, and he's written a lot of classic horror books. And he's also from my neck of the woods. He's from the state of Maine, which is where I live. And so I feel like as a book reader from Maine, I am required to read something by Stephen King at some point. So I'm going to be reading Salem's Lot. I know next to nothing about this book. The only thing that I know about this book is that vampires are involved somehow. And that is literally it. I know nothing else about this book. I haven't even read the blurb on the back, which I might do before I read it. But I know nothing about this book, so I'll be going into it basically blind. I hope I enjoy it. I really want to get into Stephen King. He's got a lot of books that sound very interesting to me. And I really want to read his Dark Tower series because that's his fantasy series. And he's written some other fantasy books here and there, it seems, but that's his main fantasy series. But I've heard that it works best if you have read some of his other stuff first. So I want to get into some of his stuff, especially some of his standalones, because if I want to read Dark Tower eventually, I want to make sure I like his writing style. So I'm going to read some of his standalones and things like that first, and then eventually I'll probably try to read Dark Tower if I end up enjoying his work. So I'm very excited for that one. The next one on my list is another one I've been looking forward to for a long time. Really, most of these are ones I've been looking forward to for a long time. Is I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells. Dan Wells is an author that I am pretty familiar with outside of his books because he does his Intentionally Blank podcast with Brandon Sanderson, which I love. I listen to that podcast every single week as soon as it comes out, and I have a blast with it. And he just seems like a super awesome guy. And I have heard that his John Cleaver books are really great, this being the first one. I've been looking forward to reading some of Dan's books for a while also, because, you know, I listen to the podcast that he does with Sanderson, which I love, and he's also going to be writing for the Cosmere soon, which is super exciting, and I'm very curious how that's going to go, and I want to get into his work a little bit before that happens. And I've also just heard good things about his books, especially this one, and the rest of the trilogy, the first John Cleaver trilogy. It seems like an interesting book. Don't know a ton about it, kind of the same as Salem's Lot. I know a little bit about it. I probably know more about it than I do Salem's Lot, but not hugely. So I'm very excited to read it, and I think this is a pretty short one too. I think it's less than 300 pages, and really none of the books on my list for this month are super long. Actually, I think the longest one is Salem's Lot, which is less than 700 pages, which is nice. But yeah, really looking forward to I Am Not a Serial Killer. The next one on my list is, again, one that I've been looking forward to for a while. The next three are kind of adjacent to H.P. Lovecraft, because I feel like if I'm going to start branching out into other horror, that's a good place for me to start because it's already something I'm kind of familiar with. And so I kind of want to start with, a couple of the big ones, the heavy hitters like Stephen King, and then also, Dan Wells, who I, know from his podcast and things like that. And then also want to get into some stuff that's adjacent to Lovecraft, because I just think that's, for me, the safe choice, is to start out with something that I'm already somewhat familiar with. And so first, I am going to be reading The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Laval, I think is the name of the author. This is a novella, actually. It's only, I think, 150 pages. And this is actually a retelling of a Lovecraft story, which is The Horror at Red Hook, which I have read that short story, but frankly, I cannot remember a single thing about it. So I may reread it again before I read this novella. We'll see, just so I can see how it compares. But I'm looking forward to this one. I've heard this is a good novella. The Lovecraft fan community seems to enjoy it and considers it a really good retelling. And so I am looking forward to reading it. The next two on my list are two that I cannot remember the author of, so I apologize. But they're two books in the Arkham Horror series, which are The Last Ritual and The Mask of Silver, I believe is the title for both of those. These are two standalone books within the Arkham Horror series. For those of you who don't know, Arkham Horror is, I think, a board game based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft and his contemporaries who contributed to the Cthulhu mythos. And these two books are standalones within that wider series. And they're two ones that I was able to find. I didn't really look for any particular books in this series. I just want to read more Cthulhu mythos horror stuff. And so I saw these two were available at my local bookstore, and I grabbed them, or at least online from their website. So there's lots of other books in this series, but these are the two that I found, so I grabbed them. So I don't know a whole lot about these two books specifically. Again, haven't really looked into them very much. I only know that they're part of this line of books. But I'm really looking forward to these mainly because I have been wanting to read more Cthulhu mythos by other authors besides Lovecraft. Because by now I have read basically everything Lovecraft ever wrote, with a few exceptions. There's probably a few stories that I've missed, but I've read the vast majority of his work, including most or all of his Cthulhu mythos. And where there are so many other authors who have contributed to that mythos over the years, I want to read some of those other stories. Last October, I read the short story collection Cthulhu's Reign, which was my first non-Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos experience, which was quite enjoyable. So I'm hoping I enjoy these as well, and if I do, I'll probably check out some more Arkham Horror books. The last book on my list is the one book on this list that is not horror, although I wanted to have something else in there just to vary things up a little bit. Plus, I wasn't sure that I may not be able to get to absolutely everything on this list just because my reading has been a little bit lower lately. But this one will probably be the last priority out of all of these just because it's not one of the horror books. But I wanted to have something else in there just to fill in that gap if I do have some spare time left over, and that is Lost Tribe of the Sith by John Jackson Miller. This is a Star Wars book. I believe it's a collection of short stories or novellas set in the Old Republic era. This is actually the last Old Republic book that I need to read before I've read everything in that era, so I've been wanting to get my hands on this one for a long time. For, again, a few reasons. First of all, it's written by John Jackson Miller, who wrote a couple of Star Wars books, such as Kenobi, which I love, Knight Errant, which I don't love at all, and those are the only two of his that I've read. I believe he also wrote a book for the canon. I believe he wrote A New Dawn as well, but I haven't read that one. But I do love Kenobi, so I think that he can write really good stuff. It's a Sith story, which I absolutely love. I love dark side stories. and it's an Old Republic book, and it's the only one left that I needed, and I want to, even though the Old Republic era has the least number of books in it by a pretty significant amount out of the various different eras within Star Wars Legends, it'll just feel nice to cross a whole era off my list. So I really wanted to get to this one. So I'm really looking forward to this one. The reason I picked this book specifically for October is I was hoping I could get my hands on Red Harvest, or not Red Harvest, the other one, Death Troopers by Joe Schreiber. And I was hoping I could get my hands on that one because that's a Star Wars zombie book, and read that for October, but I was not able to find it. And so instead I decided to go with this one because I assume, will be a darker book because it focuses so heavily on the Sith. So I figured at least that would be somewhat thematically appropriate for the Halloween season. So that is pretty much it for this video. Those are my 6, I think, books that I have picked out to read during October. Let me know down in the comments which ones of these you are most excited to hear me talk about. I will be reviewing at least most of these books in October. My plan is to review all 5 of the horror books in October. The way that the month is set up, I will actually be able to do that, plus another book review for a Spider-Man book because the new Spider-Man video game is coming out this month. And so my review for that book will be coming out on the day that video game is supposed to release. But other than that, and a couple other videos here and there that I'm planning, I will have the entire month filled out with reviews for these books. And then Lost Tribe of the Sith will probably go either at the end of the month or some other time. So let me know which one of these you're most excited to hear my thoughts on. If you have read any of these, let me know what you thought of them. And that is pretty much it for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.